Bob. Right.
Any music today, Maya?
Yes. Can you hear it? Is it too loud?
Pretty loud.
Trying to turn it down.
I'm not hearing you.
Normally Jeff calls me on my volume because I can't tell.
I'm gonna leave and come back in. I'm not getting any sound.
You're not? All right, come back, Fred.
I think I was getting his sound and my sound.
It was double.
That's right. I was getting all the sound.
Okay. Might be some more people rolling in here the next couple of minutes, but I'll go ahead and get us started. So welcome everyone to Journeys of Growth and Belonging. So great to see familiar faces and some new ones as well. So so happy to be here with you all today. And normally I'm hosting these monthly storytelling sessions with my co-host Jeff, who is in New York facilitating Flawless Consulting, our workshop this week. So he couldn't be here with us today, but I'm flying solo on the hosting game, but that's okay for me. And I'm happy to see you all after a month break in June. So I hope you're having a great summer so far. For those of you who are here for the first time, Journeys of Growth and Belonging is a monthly storytelling session where we come together to hear from amazing individuals in what I call a community of practice around convening community, creating a sense of belonging and just love. So I'm happy to see returning faces, and if you're new and you want to ever come in and be a storyteller as well, feel free to reach out. But without any further ado, we have Marne today with us, and we're going to have a conversation with her in a little bit. But in the spirit of our convening style here at Design Learning, we're going to do a bit of connection before content, which means I'm going to stick you all into breakout rooms with about 3 or 4 people to have a little conversation around why was it important for you to show up here today. So in a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds, you'll get these invitations. All right. There you go. See you in a bit. They have about 60 seconds. It's always a good sign when people don't hop back out of the breakout rooms too early.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Well, it's always a good sign when people don't rush out of breakout rooms. So I hope that that was a good conversation. So before we move much further, I'd like to open up the room just to ask you, what struck you about the conversation that you just had? And feel free to just unmute yourself. I think we're a small enough group.
It always strikes me about how many of the connections among the people in the breakout groups go back to Peter's master class 3 years ago. That was our discussion with Cara and Robin, that we all trace back to that. It's like a large family. I think we all feel like we're kind of coming home to something when we meet monthly.
In our group, what struck me was how people are just the sense of interest in the notion of belonging and the desire to promote that, whether that's in community, whether it's in organizations, whether it's just in small clusters of friends, of people that you meet, how strangers become friends. And just the strong desire for that individually, as well as the sense that from a societal standpoint, there's there is certainly lots of desire for that.
Absolutely.
And what struck me was just that, we like to do this. We like to be here because of our experience with it, and to get to know each other. And it felt good to get to know each other a little bit.
Yeah. What struck me is sort of the power of ideas. Just that Peter Block, I start off with his ideas of consulting, and obviously through authentic being and then belonging and community and so forth. So those ideas really pull people together, and they're very powerful. And so that is interesting that to me that can happen in that way. So. And it does give you a sense of belonging just because you share some ideas with some people, and they're sort of high-seeking ideas. They're not low ideas. There's something ideals that have a purpose behind them. That's just my immediate thought.
Thanks, Graham. Right. So we've arrived at the moment, Marnie. Are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be is what I was going to say. Yes.
Marnie is here joining us from Portland, and it is 7:30 in the morning. Oh, well, now 7:49. Cara too, I know. So anybody and I think Sam was telling me he just woke up before I very bluntly just threw him into a breakout room. So thanks all of you who are here very early for being champs. I do want to acknowledge that. I'm not an operator. I don't operate very well at 7:30 in the morning. So I give you guys a lot of credit. So I was lucky enough to meet Marnie in person, actually, in Cincinnati, because she's one of our new affiliate consultants for design learning. And I must say, just personally, she is someone who creates a sense of belonging and an acute awareness of the energy around her and the people around her in many interactions. So I am just so happy to have her here as our storyteller. Her journey began well, I guess 15 years of her journey was spent in architecture. So today we're going to talk a little bit about something that actually we haven't spent a lot of time on in Journeys of Growth and Belonging, which is our physical space, as well as a lot of other elements and what contributes to our sense of belonging. So Marne, first question for you is, why did you choose to be on this journey?
This specific journey, I would, so I graduated from architecture school in the early 90s, mid 90s. So I did do architecture for a really long time and left it and came back and left it and came back. And most of my friends are architects and my world is architecture. And my friends before OD, I guess. And what I was always doing, my favorite part of everything was talking to folks and understanding how they were going to experience their lives in a new way. How are you going to experience this? Are you going to create a place for people to work? Are you creating I worked a lot in healthcare, so lots of spaces for folks of different ages and different abilities and different experiences of life. And listening to them and hearing what they said, and I've said, hearing what they don't say and how they describe space and how they describe how they will live in that space. They are not architects typically, so they're talking about how it looks and how it feels and how it smells and tastes and describing how they want to be in the world and how they want to experience their lives in space. And so taking that and interpreting it was what I did for so long, and spending that time with people and creating experiences for them was the part I loved. There was a lot I didn't love, but that part I did love. And when I found out that OD existed, I didn't realize it right away, but now I do, that it is exactly the same thing. So I'm an organization development consultant and a coach, and I still am creating experiences for people. And I think about them that way. So I think about it in, I kind of say 6 or 7 dimensions. Like I think of all of the senses, all of our senses that we are experiencing in space. And I do a lot of virtual work. So I also think of it virtually. So I want you to experience as many senses as I can and experience. I think about your temporal experience. I think of your spatial experience. I think of your emotional experience. And also what's really exciting for me, Dan Siegel's work and the 3 points. So he talks about mind, brain, and how much of our time we spend in mind, brain individually. But the 3rd point of that triangle is relationship. So, I mean, that's another dimension, is that relationship dimension that is happening in space. And so structure of belonging is literally hitting all of those points without saying it in an architectural term. It is creating space for relationship. It is creating space for emotion and seeing each other. So I feel like I still design space. I still am designing experiences. I do a lot of work virtually. I work in Miro a lot. So I am literally creating spaces to take people on experiences, to take people on a journey, try to incorporate time. I try to incorporate movement and space. And if we're doing this together, what does that look like? How would you interpret that? If you said, here's what we're doing, how do you interpret that graphically? And how is that graphic a spatial experience? How can we be together in space when we're not even in the same room? And in the same room, how can we be together in space? And what does that feel like? And Gestalt talks about field. So what is that field? How do we create a field? How do we what does our field look like? It's different every single time. What does it look like? How does it feel? What does it taste like? What does it sound like? How do we create it and protect it and be together in space? That's kind of a long-winded way of saying how I got here is this is it's delicious. There's nothing better than this. There's nothing better than working with people into finding places together and seeing each other and being in community with each other and creating experiences with and for people.
So in this journey of, creating space for relationship and belonging and community, what are some of the mile markers or milestones that have caused you to pause?
Wow. So there's so much to this question. There's so many personal things that have happened in my life that have changed my trajectory dramatically. And I mean, I feel like that's a conversation over a glass of wine, but we can also talk about how my relationship to architecture and space changed. And it happened after I left architecture. And I did a project with Dr. Amada Perez and a company called Brick Architecture, where I was a facilitator on the project, where we did a long-range facilities plan for Portland Public Schools. And it was in September 2020. And Amada Perez is a critical race theory specialist. And she was brought on because this project was put on the street, put to bid, with asking for a critical race theory specialist. So we bid on this project and did win it, and did the entire project with this critical race theory lens. And Dr. Amada's work is called critical race sociospatial theory. So it's a sociospatial critical look at space and world. And it is the idea of, as critical race theory is, that space is inherently racist. And as much as my body rebelled against that, and I've said my whole life, I know good design and I know bad design, and I can see it and I know it. And and I've been trained to describe it, so I can tell you why it is and why it isn't. And there are inherently good and inherently bad, good and bad spaces, architecture, urban planning experiences. And through this experience, I learned how much of that is simply conditioning. I was trained for 6 years in architecture by all men and one woman, who were trained by all men, who were trained by all men, who worked in a field that was male, who, and all of the work that we appreciate, and I mean, I still love, was supported by publishers who published books by white men who they've decided were to be published. So the entire architecture that I know and love and was trained in was very curated. It was incredibly curated. I mean, theoretically curated and systemically curated. Also, I didn't hear about any of the female architects. That was not part of my training. So not just in the broad sense of architecture is same true for OD, yes. So not just as in spaces, what is good and linear things, and I love concrete and glass. I love concrete and glass and rough and marble concrete. And we were talking about in our small room. And the things that I know to be good are simply, systemic and curated. So it blew my whole idea of what I know to be true and good in the world. And it blew my whole idea of everything. Like, if this could be so, if I could be so conditioned and to the death, seeing this, and I was completely wrong, or completely, wrong is a big word. then, what is true in the world. And in that process, we held listening and learning sessions in the community with students. We did affinity groups, so BIPOC students, Spanish speaking, and in Portland, that's a large Spanish speaking, and then we call them open sessions, so anyone could come, with students, with administrators, with teachers, with community members, with parents. And we did it for about 5 months of meetings every single night, having all these opening, listening, and talking to folks about how they experience space, and in particular, Portland Public Schools. And in that experience, we looked at spaces about how binary they are, how you go to the left or to the right when you go to the bathroom, sometimes there's another. And the signage in our world is there's a stick figure that's a man that is everyone, and a woman has a triangle added to her. She has a skirt on. So it's one or the other. It's the opposite sex. You go one way or the other. From a little tiny child, you have to make this decision one way or the other. We're conditioned in our space to see the world as we see it. We see gates. You can't go beyond this gate. What does it look like on this side of the gate versus that side of the gate? We see classism. We see elitism. We see all of these different isms in our world, in our space, and it is all ableism. I mean, the way that our world is created for people who can walk and reach, and then not created for people who don't. We're in a learning group with Shaw right now, where we talk about how you're disabled when your environment causes you to be so. You're not disabled when you're in an environment that doesn't require you to run or reach. So this project, again, we could talk about this project forever. This project made me look at the world in a new way, made me question kind of everything. And that led me to liberatory design, and led me to kind of the interrogation of everything I do. So how do I create, from an OD workshop to a coaching situation to conversation with friends, how can I interrogate that and look at it and look for all the isms that are in my my very curated experience of the world as a white woman, cisgendered.
And as you move through, whether it's thinking about space or even creating a virtual mural board, and just using this lens, I guess, to inform all sorts of design, whether it's convening, designing, bringing people together, designing, hosting a workshop, or creating collateral that you're going to use, not collateral, man, if it's something you're going to use to facilitate that meeting, what has been surprising you as you've incorporated that into your journey?
So this project was in September 2020, when everyone had just gone virtual, recently. And so it was actually completely virtual experience. All of these community meetings, everything was virtual. And immediately there was a new access to each other and a recognition of limited access. So if you didn't have Wi-Fi or a connection to the internet and a computer or a phone, you couldn't be involved in these conversations. Prior to this, if you couldn't get a babysitter and had your evenings free and a transportation and knowledge about the community meeting and an invitation that was literally inviting and not, you see a sign and go, well, that's not for me, then you were not included in the conversation. So there are so many divides that seeing them and recognizing them is the best way I know how to do it. And liberatory design, I don't know how common that is in people's day-to-day. Liberatory design, it looks at designed learning, which is Stanford's D School of Empathetic. I'll just do it really quick. I don't know how much people know about it. So design thinking, not designed learning. Design thinking is the idea of this empathetic interview in order to understand a user. So in an architecture situation or a design situation, in order to understand who will be using this, it's empathetic interviews, it's watching, being in the space and watching people and how they move through a space, and understanding less from what we were talking about in our small room, less from how I think people should use the space, and less from how, I know architecture to be good and true. Here's how I will design it. It is an empathetic view of it. So how do I get in and really understand the people who are going to use it? And there's a whole concept of these empathetic interviews anyway, and then designing it and prototyping it and testing it out and then prototyping it. So there's this whole design thinking. And then liberatory design appends that with an interrogation of isms. So I'm a white cisgendered woman. I interrogate every step with all the questions I can think of am I being racist in this? Am I being ableist in this? How is the space open to everyone I want to invite to it? How can I make it as much open to everyone I want, everyone who should be there? And in looking at the 6 conversations and the 6 questions, they're kind of perfect for interrogation of myself. So I can say, what does my invitation look like? How is my invitation open to everyone? Is my invitation, am I saying it in a way that says, please, we want everyone to be as welcome, Shah. We want everyone to be as present as possible, and tell us how we can make that happen. Is there anything you need? Is there any accommodation you need? That it isn't just folks who use a wheelchair, it's folks who process differently. We think so much about how people process now. Who's the people? Are they just the people who are speaking all the time quickly, like me, who immediately start talking and talk a lot? Or are they the people who need to sit and process? Can I send things before a meeting so that they can read them and process and maybe journal? Can I ask a question and then be quiet and say, let's have a few minutes of quiet so everyone can think about this, so that then we can share? Can we use the chat? Can we use the Miro board? I use the Miro board a lot. So in every single one of the questions, the series of questions, I can interrogate myself, I can interrogate the experience, as well as using them to meet each other. Just a little example of invitation, but all of them have, buckets of ways to look at things myself. What am I bringing to the space? What am I holding on to that's creating the problem? How can I look at this in a way that I can put some of those things down?
I was just revisiting the answer to how is yes. I don't know if you guys can see this. One of Peter's books. And he talks about the architecture archetype, or the architect, that's a hard one to say. Archetype. And he speaks about somebody called Christopher Alexander. But it's just, to me, it's this.
This is my Christopher Alexander.
Amazing.
This is how I read Peter.
It's a little bit like it's the way he describes it is it's the mix of somebody with the training of the engineer, but the compassion to care deeply about the experience of those who inhabit the structure. And I think as we move through, I live in Rio, and sometimes there are there are buildings, informal housing, and I don't know, this might be going way off topic, so, but there's informal housing, you know, which is actually normally built by the people who will inhabit them. And we can go into a whole conversation about infrastructure or whatever, but they're very cool. And actually in some of the spaces, they are really built for, I don't know, sense of a community structure, like for people to come together and to be together. And that's the gift that exists within favelas here in Rio, is that sense of belonging and community, aside from a lot of things that are not great, but we focus on what is good. And then when, like, there have been occasions where people are forced to leave these spaces because they're informal housing and go into apartment buildings, which are blocks. They're built to cut off, they're built to be in isolation, right? In your little apartment with a thick door, like you don't interact with your neighbors at all. And that's something that kind of jumps out and screams at me too, is that there must be a way to build for community and to build for belonging, even in places where you don't have the potential of having a big blueberry farm that also is a commune or something. Invite me, Carl. Or, you know,
or whatever.
whatever it may be, but it's in an urban space. It's curious how, whether we're designing something to operate in a physical space or in a virtual space, that we have to take into consideration how that will allow us to be entirely present or in relationship with others, or whether it just fosters more isolation and loneliness. What's surprising you as you see as you enter this space, organizational development, which is so similar and yet so different from what's surprising you in this journey?
So interestingly, coming from architecture, where there was no a group I worked with on a leadership retreat weekend of architects who are getting ready to retire and hand over to their junior architects. One man had a breakthrough and said, I am the abused who has become the abuser. So architecture is, schooling is crits, where you spend 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months designing something that comes out of your heart, that you've been inspired by a poem, or it's different from work, but it is something so personal and so deep in your soul that then you pin up, and you've represented it as well as you can in a 2D way, and pin it up on a wall and have a group of judges tear you to shreds. And so then you have to stand there and take it, and you learn how to become kind of bulletproof through that. So it is interesting that the idea of an engineer who can, you know, interpret emotion, there's hardly emotion in an architecture office. It is a very ego driven, and it's such a long story, but it is a very you're not like, how was your day? Well, like, there's no check-ins, there's no interacting with each other in an emotional way. It's changing a lot, and I would say it doesn't matter. It's changing. And when I came to OD, I was like, what is this crying all about? How are you, how come we're all talking about our feelings and our emotions? Because we're going to commit, like, it was a very shock to my system coming to OD. I didn't know OD existed, I don't know, 3 months before I started at Pepperdine. So I dove into it, and like I do most things, and recognizing that my experience was less the norm than I thought, that people are desperate for this and they want it so much. They want connection so much, even if they don't have the vocabulary for it. Almost every time I design a weekend or a thing, I go in there and I think, all right, you all, like in my head, this is going to be a little woo woo here. We're going to do this stuff, you know, and they just, it's delicious. They want it so bad. And in my conditioning is this isn't normal, but I think it is much more normal. I think people want OD so much, even when they don't know what it means or they've never heard of the field. I think I'm so continuously surprised every time I sit down with a team or a group and I say, okay, we're going to do this thing that I'm going to ask you to, and they're like, great. They dive in and they love it and they say, I didn't know that about you. I didn't, especially this questions like, I've worked with this woman 20 years. I didn't know her this well. And yeah, so maybe the longing for it and the knowing it, if they don't, even when they don't know it, is the surprise.
And what does success look for you in terms of this journey? What does it look like and how are you getting there?
So in thinking of not just working less and making more that everybody probably wants, you know, Deb said to me one time, Deb Rainier said to me one time, I used to come into every experience with all my tools and I would have all my toolboxes and I would know all my tools and I would have all my agendas and all my, you know, tools held. And she said, then I realized that I could just put all the tools down and come in. And I said, well, I think that's because all your tools are like in your bones and you are all of those things. They are you. And I think that would be success, is to just be able to not only do it, but trust in the doing it, that I can just show up and people are it's gonna, what Deb says, that it always happens, always does. So to be able to trust in that enough and not be, you know, building my agenda to the every 3 minutes, the way that I tend to do.
And for those of us in the room who are always hearing wonderful things about organizational development and everybody I know who like went to Pepperdine or works in organizational development really loves it and feels like that this is it, this is the place. Just before we move into our next breakouts, I just want to ask, what excites you the most about it? What excites you the most about working to inspire transformation with and belonging within organizations or industries or whatever?
It's kind of where I live, is that I love to be in that place of where your brain is sparkling of ideas and a new group and folks who, or a group you've seen so many times, and the anticipation of that experience. You know, Peter says, what struck you? We ask what struck you because everyone wants to be struck by lightning. And in doing some work with some of my dear friends around our mission statements, that's kind of where I landed, is that I want to create the space for lightning strikes. Like I want those feelings in school that blew me out of my chair, that blew, you know, and I've spent so much time working on myself, and then in school seeing the world in a new way, and connecting with people like I didn't know you can connect with people, knowing people like I didn't know, being seen like I didn't know I could be seen, being able to create that container and build a space for folks to come together and see each other in that way and be witness to it is I'll never get tired of that. I will forever be inspired by that.
Thank you so much, Marnie. Truly inspired, and now looking at everything with a different lens also. So we're going to move back into breakout rooms, and Fatima just joined us. Hi, Fatima. And the question is, what struck you about what you just heard from Marnie? And we'll be together in these breakout rooms for about 12 minutes, 12, 13 minutes. And I'm gonna take a little co-creation of this experience. Should we do same breakout rooms or new breakout rooms? Anyone? Anyone have a preference? I'm gonna mix it up. All right. New. Thanks. Get to know some new people. I agree. Wonderful. Welcome back. Hi, everyone. Hope you had enough time. So
Never enough time.
never
Ran out
enough time in the small groups. I agree. Well, we do have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up for larger group conversations. So what struck you about either what you talked about in your small groups or what you heard today? And like, we can do the same thing. I think anybody can just unmute.
But one thing I took away is I know that I have to do a better job of connecting with people in Zoom meetings and regular work meetings. I'm just going to have to figure it out. But
what I took away is everybody seems concerned about that. And we had Marnie in our group. It was wonderful. And she said, yeah, they come to the meeting that way. They just want to do business, so connecting will be a real little art to try to develop at the beginning.
I like that. It's the urge of going back to basic humanity or humankind. Be human and be kind. I think we're talking about connecting, where the whole world is very much based on now getting more technology. We're missing that human touch or just listening to someone or seeing someone. I don't know if anyone saw that experiment of the artist who was sitting in the middle of the room just looking at people, and it it creates a connection. That urge for connection is, I think it's hidden, but it's much needed in this world.
Yeah, besides technology, everybody just wants to beat everybody up too, with the political thing and everything else. Everybody wants to be on top of everything.
Yeah, it's I guess it's the culture. The more you look at something, the more you get adjusted to it. If you're working in a slaughterhouse, you get desensitized to the fact that you're just cutting meat the whole day and you don't realize what you're doing. So you get into that automated mode. And in the world, just open up your phone and the algorithm is so tricky these days that will show you the same thing over and over in different ways. So if you're looking at people beating up each other, you're just going to keep on looking at that the whole day. And I mean, I get to a point where I'm like just throwing my phone away. What about people? What are they looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, we always say it's easy to fall into the dominant narrative because that's where we are from. So it's easiest to fall back to what we know. And it takes a lot of intention to move to this alternative. Whether it's all an alternative, I question. I think it's the natural way, but it could be the way that our ancestors were. So is it an alternative? I don't know.
What I'm really thinking about this morning is the way, it's funny, Marnie, because I had never thought about this design of physical space in this way. And I just saw someone speak who's a regenerative architect. And I had not heard of that. And he was just talking about the ways that our whole lives are kind of designed to keep us away from each other. Like roads that keep us in our cars, that keep us away in our houses, that keep us away from our neighbors, and just the entire way that our society is designed is to keep us having space from each other. And then to just think about the thinking that was underneath that, and then the ways it's influencing us that we don't really think about. That's what I'm thinking about today, all the way down to like, how do you set up the chairs in a room when you're getting ready to do an event, which like, I know enough to think about that, but there's so much more to think about. So thank you for putting that little seed in my brain today.
That's the American dream, Cara, to have your own house or own your own space.
Right. I mean, and that's like the definition of class, isn't it? Is having more and more space that you don't have to be close to people. You can pay for the buffering.
Wow. Yeah.
We talk about that in architecture. That's like the kind of the death of connection and community is the suburbs, is driving your car into your garage and closing the door and going in your house. So there's no more walking down the street and seeing your neighbors and sitting on the porch and having your kids play. We literally have created a world where we drive away from each other and go into without seeing anyone. Yeah.
So why is that so? Like, what was the cultural phenomenon that had the culture move in that direction? So we might be missing something about why the suburbs were created.
I mean, my thought of that is we always react to a pain point. So that we heard this so much in that project I was talking about earlier. Schools are designed in a way to not only keep kids in and contained and controlled, but also to keep people out, to keep shooters out. So now it's worse and worse and worse because of experiences. People go, we have to react to that. Now there are airlocks upon airlocks to get into a building. There's barricades in front of it. It is a place that you have to kind of squeak in. It's not an entrance that welcomes. So I imagine cities were not great. So what we idealize about city living and density and living together in community was probably not great in reality. So in thinking, I could have my own play, I could have a yard, my kids could play outside and they don't have to worry about being on the street, all of the things that idealize a way of living, and stamp,
Right.
gets replicated and exponentially grows.
But that, yes, that was the result with the stamp in terms of architecture and creating spaces, living spaces in terms of the suburbs. But when we think about that push towards the suburb, there's a dynamic of people wanting to separate from other people. And if we think about race and racism in the context of the suburbs being created, that the idea was to separate yourself from those who didn't look like you, or culturally wasn't the way that you experienced, you wanted to experience life, or you wanted your children to experience life. And so that kind of gets dismissed in the context of space and who has space and who doesn't. So you were able to move to a suburb and get more space, but there was also another dynamic pushing you towards that kind of desire. And that's what helps keep the separation, is our inability to really think, what does it take to be human and to connect?
And also, even if you could afford it, you weren't allowed.
Right.
To people. So it was intentionally, systematically divided. So you were only white people could go. So you weren't invited, even if you could afford it, even if your family, even if those were your neighbors before, you weren't invited. You were literally not allowed. So it was also very intentionally kept up. I don't know what the word is for that.
Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. In our small group, when I don't remember his name, but he was speaking about, the creation of space and having space so that, the kind of energy for actually connecting can actually happen, is that in some places, there is no space. And so you have to generate the space from an energetic place. It has to be created inside of spaces that are not open and expansive and allowing, I just think about being in a city, in a church, in a basement, trying to create space. And what does it take when there's no sunlight and when there's no like wall space, so it's like this. So if we could really take, and my tagline for my organization is from empty places to healing spaces. And so it's not just the actual physical space that helps us to generate our creating a new reality. It's also the space that's from within us that helps to generate our connectedness as human beings.
Gorgeous. Thank you. That's beautiful. And inspiring, and makes me feel like it's possible listening to you say it. I mean, makes me believe you.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for this conversation, and I know I'm going to be leaving thinking about so much. I'm just looking out my window right now, and I can see the city, so I'm like, wow, lots on my mind, lots of intentions set. I hope you all, if you want, I like doing this, feel free to leave one word in terms of how you're feeling, leaving the conversation in the chat. But it was a gift to spend this time with you. We are at the top of the hour, and I'll stick around for a couple of minutes, and if anybody else wants to as well, feel free. I did want to respect everyone's time, especially our early birds who are probably just now starting their day, but expansive, beautiful. Feel similar. Love that, Kara. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope to see you next session, which will be, I believe, August 25th. So next month, and that will be with our Ariel Sullivan as well. So you'll get more info about that coming up. Marnie, you are a rock star. You're inspirational. You're just bombastic. So thank you.
Thanks, Marnie.
Thanks.
See you next month, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you, everyone. Good to be here.
Thank you. What a
Thank
joy.
you, Marnie.
Thank you.
So
for
good.
having-
Thank you,
I love it.
Marnie.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
thanks so much. Yeah, Maya, how do I sign up for next month? I forgot how I got here in the first place, but I'd like to come.
It's the same, the same Zoom invitation. You can actually register for reoccurring sessions. So if you
Oh.
click on the link, I can send you, Graham, I probably have your email. So what I'll do is I'll just send you the link right after.
Okay,
you.
well, thank you so much for organizing it. It was really great.
Thank you. Thanks for
And
being here.
is it possible, Marnie, I'd love to just hear more. I'm so sorry I was so late. I got caught in something else. But I'd like to get her contact if she doesn't mind. I'd like to have a little further conversation with her inside of what she presented. The little bit that I did get. Thanks so much. Okay, I got it.
That's my
And
first email. Thank you.
Make sure to also send out the recording in case you want to check it out.
Okay, good.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Mhm.
wonderful weekend.
Thanks.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Weekend.
Thanks, sweet Sam.
Yeah.
Marnie, I just wanted one little quick thing to say. As someone who's been connected to design learning since 1985.
Wow.
Design learning is so blessed to have you.
Wow. Well, I did not create liberatory design. That's a whole group who did that.
No. I didn't say have liberatory design. I said to have you.
Oh, thank you.
So it's true. So thank you for being part of this and sharing that. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Till the next time I see you. Bye for now. And see you, Maya. Thanks for being the keeper of the faith.
Hi, Brad. Thanks so much for being here. And thanks for coming, Fatima. Glad you came and you added so much to the conversation, even if you missed the bulk of Marnie's story. I think you got the essence without even being there. So I really appreciate you coming and being so present.
Thank you so much. And thank you for holding the space, Maya. It's really very important conversations. And it has so much depth when we can have time to do it. And and thank you, Marnie. I definitely want to connect with you
Love
and maybe invite you to our podcast on creating community conversations for connection.
Wow. Thank you. That's an honor. I've been in other calls with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
That makes me feel very good and honored that you said that.
Oh, thank you very much. All right, so everyone have a wonderful weekend and until next time.
You too. You too. See you next time.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.